G'day, welcome to Mark and Sam After Work. Today I want to do a video just to answer with a little more detail the answer to the question of why it is that I single feed. Why do I single feed rather than use the magazine? For those that don't know what I'm talking about there, basically with a bolt action rifle, they are something you have to action the bolt to get a projectile or a round into them. And you can do that really one of two ways. You can either put them in a magazine rifle, a rifle that has a magazine in it. You can fill your magazine up with rounds, whether that's 3 or 5 or 10 or 15 or whatever it is. You can put all the rounds in here, then you put your magazine into your rifle, and then one after the other you rack them in there, you fire them, you let the shell out, you put another one in by racking the bolt until you're empty, and then you fill up your magazine again. That's one way of doing it. The other way of doing it, in most situations, you can simply put a round in, rack it, it'll come out, catch it, do whatever you want to do, put another one in and just single feed them like that. And I suppose there's a couple of things I would say, but I'll go through the details. The simple answer is it's what I prefer to do. The more complicated answers, there's a few levels to it. But the other simple bit is because a rifle has a magazine doesn't mean that's how you have to use it. You use it how it suits you in all sorts of forms, and that goes for all sorts of things on the rifle. You don't have to do things any particular way because of this. You really are generally changing things, especially in the precision world and the ELR world, to suit what you want to do and what your results, what you want to end up with. So, why do I prefer to do it? Well, I suppose the story starts at the rifle I've got in front of me. This is my TRG, Seiko TRG 42. Looks quite different now with different furniture and bits and pieces on it, but really the action, the magazine, the trigger, the bolt are all the same as what they started with. And I started with shooting rounds a lot like this, this is hand load, but still it's basically what the factory loads are generally like. It's a 250 grain projectile set up at really a length at where the 250 grain wants to sit, which has got nothing to do with ring lands to the lands or the jump or the overall length of the projectile, more than what fits in the magazine. That's what I started using in factory rounds and then in hand loads, and that's where I started. So I was using the magazine at that stage approximately 10 years ago, starting to do my bits and pieces. It worked quite well. Then I changed over to a round that looks like this. It's a 300 grain projectile, and I set up the overall length to suit the barrel. What that's talking about is running the projectile further forward to where it has a set amount of jump or gap between the ogive, or where the bullet or the projectile touches the rifling, where it starts, set that up at a particular distance. And I found that wouldn't run in the magazine. And so out of that, I had to single feed to test and do that sort of stuff. I quickly found out that for what my sort of shooting is, there were no negatives in single feeding. When it takes 1 second to 3 seconds to 5 seconds to 10 seconds between shots, I watch it depends on the timing of things, but I can watch for my impact, listen for the call, or just in the way of getting ready to take one round out, put it in the bullet box, take another one and put it in here. Really worked nicely for my timing side of things. I also found that when I tried to go back to magazine feeding, there was a little negative. And that is, unless I had the shot done inside a magazine in extreme long range, when I'm trying to read the wind conditions between me and the spotter, or me and the conditions, or whatever it is, I'm trying to read and get the cycles that are going on out there, I found that the braking for the magazine, the shot, do another one, get it ready to go, is about right timing for everything in the way of from barrel temperature to what I was up to the shot timing to all the rest of it and getting ready to shoot. There was no time lost if I'd racked the bolt or put a round in from a magazine, or single feeding made no difference to the timing of when I was going to shoot for the stuff I'm doing. But I found that the moment you ran out of a magazine and you needed to put another magazine, that interval of filling another magazine up caused I had to go to a rediscovery. The condition has changed enough to mean that the last shot wasn't relevant, or as relevant as it would have been if it was done in the normal cycle. So that's one thing I found I preferred. But then the other things I found as real benefits is that when you magazine feed, well, I suppose in the precision world, we're hand loading, we're putting a fair bit of effort into all the equipment, all the materials. So we buy good brass, good projectiles, we do a lot of work to make everything in prepping and looking after everything, and we want at least our brass to last as well as it can for as long as it can. So when you put them into a magazine, you slide them into the steel part of the magazine. Generally good magazines are metal magazines, so you slide them in the steel, so there's a bit of steel rubbing against brass. When you put another one in, the top bullet is rubbing, or top round is rubbing against the second round, so they're all rubbing against each other on the way in, on the way in and on the way out. When you're running the bolt across them, the top of the bolt is running across the top of the projectile or the round below that. So there's a lot of rubbing on the brass side of things, which is really not much more than aesthetic, but it is still something that is going on. You've got brass getting roughed up that I would prefer not to if I had the choice. But the final ingredient is that if you have a close look inside your action, you'll see there's a feed ramp. As that round comes up and goes into the chamber, there's a little feed ramp that helps it guide up. That feed ramp runs on the tip of the projectile. So that tends to, there's a little, if you have a look, there'll be a little copper mark. In most cases that's there, and the longer and the more VLD, the more efficient, the more high BC round, that sort of stuff, the likes of these 300 in particular, you'll see there's a little mark there. Now, you can do more with rounds. You can tip them, you can trim them and tip them and all sorts of stuff, but basically you look after them. You have them, whether they be in nice hollow point rounds or in monolithic machined rounds where they're solid copper all machined down, those tips are all very valuable bits and pieces for part of your accuracy. So to rub them against steel doesn't make any sense to me. So those are all things that don't happen in a single feeding situation and largely do happen in a magazine feeding situation. So ultimately for me at least, I should cut back to just momentarily, if it is something, if it's PRS or if it's hunting or it's tactical and that sort of stuff, there's certainly lots of good places to use a magazine. And if you're building a purpose-built ELR rifle, well, magazine might not be an option. It isn't always a positive to have there. There is some little positives out of going with single feed rifles, but largely most of the good stuff works well with both. And they look sort of better, look more tactical or more like a complete rifle with a magazine in there. And I think having the choice of using it when you do want to use it for that sort of stuff, because it's a different sort of thing, yes, I think there's values in it. And you'll see me use them for exactly those reasons, be it showing that the magazine does feed properly, or some rifles have to be fed that way because they don't like it other ways. But given the choice in my real true ELR stuff and ULR stuff, so ultra long range stuff, then I'll single feed all the time. And in most cases, I will actually buy actions that are single feed. So there's no choices because there's a little bit more structural integrity without having another hole cut through them. But that's a needless incidental, really. To have a magazine in there, it looks great. It's got those options. Still single feed makes a lot of sense to me. So ultimately, like, it comes back to, it's what I prefer, and you should do what suits you, but it's just something to keep in mind. Just maybe the single feeding has some advantages for you. Maybe it doesn't, but certainly for me, that's why I do it. That's why I prefer to do it. Yeah, and I hope that's of some interest. Anyway, guys, thanks for checking in on the video. We'll catch you next time.